from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Our topic today involves multicultural and diversity issues with great emphasis of those topics in higher education. This is a topic that we think is very important, and we're pleased to bring it to you today. In order to meet that goal, we're very pleased to welcome to the program Monty Twin, who is the Minority Coordinator and Advisor at North Idaho College. He has recently come to work at this institution, and we're very pleased to have him here at North Idaho College and on this program. Our guest was born in northern Alberta. He is a member of the Cree Nation, and he holds two BA degrees, one in the field of public administration and the second one in political science from the University of Washington in Seattle. He was awarded a scholarship from Harvard University and the Sloan Foundation, and comes to us with very good and important credentials on this subject. Monty, welcome to our program. We're pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And as always, I'm very pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, an attorney in the state of Idaho. And secondly, Steve Schink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College. And we shall ask Janelle to commence today's questioning.
Monty, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. And I think this is going to be very interesting for our viewers to learn something about the kind of program that you have. As the coordinator and advisor at North Idaho College, what are the goals of your program? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, at North Idaho College, currently there isn't a lot of cultural diversity classes or components in the classroom. So I think one of our first goals is to implement cultural diversity in the classrooms. A good example that I try to use is that, once you leave the Coeur d'Alene area, there is cultural diversity outside of this region. And I think we're doing the students a disfavor if we don't have cultural diversity in the classroom, if we don't teach it.
If they don't learn something about it here, then they can't take it with them into their future lives, is what you're saying.
That's right.
And what other kinds of things are you hoping to accomplish? What other kinds of programs?
Well, I think the celebration of cultural diversity is part of that is having events. If they're Native American powwows, Martin Luther King Day, these are events of different cultures, and to celebrate these and to let faculty and students know that what these are about, and it's an education process.
Now, do you also advise students who are minority students?
Yes, I do. I have I deal with a lot of students, people of color, and basically what I try and do is make them feel welcome here, accepted here, and comfortable. If they have any problems whatsoever, I try and help them in any way that I can to have them succeed in their educational goals.
Now, I know that you have had an experience in higher education. How does this mesh with your experience?
Well, I went to school at the University of Washington, and it's a lot more diverse, and I think that you can tell where an education, where their system is as far as cultural diversity by the money that they put into cultural diversity. And I was fortunate because the University of Washington had strong cultural diversity commitment. And so they had the Office of Minority Affairs, and that office had, let's say, an American Indian section, an African American section, and down the line. And it enabled the students that were going there to show up and have a kind of a comfort zone.
Did you take advantage of that when you were a student?
Every day.
Monty, you came here, well, let me back up. You're a graduate of the University of Washington. has a huge population which includes many minorities. So I'm going to guess that while they probably do emphasize recruiting minorities, they can focus a little bit more on making sure that the minority population they do have among their student body succeeds. Here, which do you put highest priority on? The recruitment of more minority students into a college environment where we have very few, or working with minority students that are already enrolled here?
I think that they're equally important, and I think that right off the top of my head, I would say that recruitment would be important because right now there's such a small population of minority students at North Idaho College, and personally, I would like to see that increased substantially.
What, thinking back to your own college career, and I guess my question is, if you could change one thing here, or at any college that's facing the same kind of challenge as we are, except for making the minority population the majority population. That's the only answer. You can't give me money. What one thing would you do to make minority students more comfortable at North Idaho College?
Well, currently the North Idaho College has signed a 9-point agreement with the tribe, Coeur d'Alene tribe, which is, to me, very progressive to sign an agreement with the tribe, and it shows recognition and respect of people. And part of the 9 points is that we build a longhouse on the college for the Coeur d'Alene tribal members and for people of color. And I think that would again show the importance that NIC has as far as cultural diversity.
Thank you.
Monty, we hear a lot of discussion about these issues. I'm going to broaden out the questioning. I think beyond North Idaho College, we have viewers in many states and in Canada. I want to be sensitive to those viewers too, and what I want to ask can be helpful at other institutions too in that process. When you talk about curriculum and its development, and if you go back into the 60s and look at definitions then and now, I think we could help our viewers a lot by doing some defining of terms. Is there a difference between multicultural issues and programs and diversity? I know some experts in the field say, like other issues, that we evolve and advance over time with more understanding of those definitions. Could you take us through what you believe, as a very experienced person in those areas, what they mean?
Well, I think, and this is, again, my perception, I think cultural diversity to me, would cover all cultures, whether they be people of color or European descent. And I look at cultural diversity more as a spiritual. I come from a spiritual point of view, and that is that my elders told me many years ago that all human beings have a sacredness about them, and that we're all sacred people, and all living things are sacred. And so I look at that, and when I see people from different regions of the world, or I find interesting, and it's exciting to me to learn these different ways. And to me, that's what cultural diversity is about. Multicultural, I would probably define more as people of color, people that are underrepresented within the higher education system. And there's a significant need because these people are underrepresented. And by the year 2000 or 2000 and something, there will be more people of color in the United States than non-people of color. So right now, statistically, they are very underrepresented in the education system and in employment. One of the deans of this college went to a state board of education meeting, and there was a little over 100 people there, and he said that there was 100 white males and 1 white woman. So that tells me, where we need to be for people of color to be represented.
as one looks at developing programs and sharing, and I would like to use another word, celebrating many diverse groups and interests and multicultural programs, I want to take advantage of our opportunity here to get you to elaborate upon why people look at things differently. For those individuals who are not interested in experiencing the beliefs and the life experiences of people of different cultures, would you take time to tell us why that would affect their lack, I would say, of richness, of understanding the many cultures that exist on this planet, and then contrast that with some of your own experience and others about how life changes when you do become exposed to different cultures?
Well, I think that if you, there's a word that I learned a long time ago in college, and that was called ethnocentricity. And to me, a lot of people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be of a dominant culture, it can be of any culture, where they think that their way is the only way and the best way. And I think that if you're coming from that perspective, you're really losing out a lot of life. And when you are closed-minded, you don't grow. And I think as a mature, responsible human being, individually speaking, I think that that should be one of our main goals in life, is to grow. And if part of that is cultural diversity, if part of that is education, if part of that is job change, if part of that is, being married, these are things that, as a mature adult, that we have to look at and find within ourselves.
Before I go back to the panel, I would like to ask one more question, and if you'd be so kind as to share with us one or two examples, experiences of how you learned to appreciate something in another culture and how it has changed you. It's a rather personal question, but I'm just thinking that it's a wonderful opportunity to share an experience based on what you just said about how one learns from others.
Well, I think that I've had numerous experiences like that, and I think one of the most significant times was when I met some people from Japan, and they invited me to their house, and there was a real sense of respect, and the food they ate, they talked broken English, and I became friends with them, and I took them to a powwow, and they had never been to one, and they'd never heard of one, and to watch their faces and to see the excitement that they had, and it was just an awe, and I think that's a sharing of cultures and a sharing of life, and it's exciting. It's exciting to me to learn other things about people.
Thank you. Janelle Burke.
You mentioned earlier about recruitment of students, and I'm sure there are many students who may be interested in higher education but never find their way there. What kinds of things do you do to recruit students? That's the first part of the question, and then when we've talked about that, I would like to know a bit about how you were recruited to go to the University of Washington. Was it a person in your life who suggested to you that you go? Dealing with the first part of the question, we have in mind athletic recruiters oftentimes, and they go out and they talk to the student, and they put a lot of pressure on various schools for the student to come to that school and play ball or whatever. How do you go about recruiting? Is it the same kind of process? Do you go to their homes? Do you meet with them personally? Do you invite them to the campus?
What I've been doing as far as recruitment is I go down to the reservations around here, and because that's, I think, our biggest minority population around here, and so what I do is I go to the different tribes and meet with their education departments, and if their students are there, sometimes they'll invite their students to be there because they know I'm there, and I'll tell them about North Idaho College, and and invite them up here.
Do you go right to their homes sometimes and talk with their parents as well? Do you think it has to be a family decision?
Well, I haven't done that yet, but if the time arises, or if that should arise, I would go to their homes, yes.
How did you happen to be recruited? Or was it rather an individual who encouraged you to go?
It was an individual who encouraged me to go, and I was at Spokane. I was living in Spokane at the time, and this friend of mine who worked for the Spokane School District, I was contemplating what to do with my life, and he said, "Why don't you go to school?" And so I said, "Okay," and I started going, and the more I went, the more I enjoyed it.
So you kind of went on your own. So it's perfectly possible for some students perhaps to go on their own, but a lot of them would probably need the encouragement of someone who might recruit them or who might talk to them about higher education.
Right, and I think that as far as being a Native American, there's some cultural difference because a lot of Native people don't consider education as important, and it's like when I graduated from the University of Washington, I called my mother and I said, "Mom, I graduated," and she goes, "So what? It's just not that important." And so it's all we can do is say, "Hey, we're here, and if you want to use our facility, then okay, but to make it as attractive as possible." But again, there's a cultural difference here, and the federal government promised Native people of this country and Canada, we'll pay for your education if you go to school. And how many Native people, now if you offered that to, European American people, you'd have to build humongous schools. But you offer that to Native people from a different culture, then they still don't come. So it's kind of a difficult thing.
Steve, Monty, if I can, I want to pursue that line of discussion a little bit more, and I'll relate one of my experiences. And I had the privilege of working on the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming. Many of the students, and I worked with public schools on the reservation, many of the students chose Native American colleges to go to over multicultural colleges. And in many cases, the students who chose multicultural colleges had problems there. It wasn't because they weren't bright. I know that from experience. It wasn't because they weren't well prepared. I think there are some cultural differences other than the one you just alluded to. And my impression of many of the people I met on the Wind River Indian Reservation was that, like you, they're very soft-spoken, whereas Caucasians, especially male Caucasians, tend to be boisterous and loud. In a classroom setting, I can see where that might be a disadvantage to a Native American student. They might be more hesitant to speak up, for instance, than their Caucasian counterparts. Do you agree with that assessment, first? And second, are there other cultural differences that you think are barriers to Native American students succeeding in American colleges and universities?
Well, the first part of the question, I would say that, yeah, there is a cultural barrier as far as how people communicate. And I know that when I went to school, I always sat at the very back of the room, and I was always quiet, and I never said anything, and because that's the way I was raised. You don't talk loud. To me, or to a lot of people, that's disrespectful. And I think professors would look at that and say, "Oh, this person's unmotivated," or "This person isn't learning." And Native people usually have really good ears, and they listen well. And a lot of times we hear things and we try and look behind what people are saying and not just their words. And so, we learn in a different way versus, writing and reading, because we've been learning verbally for thousands of years, and then, the European system comes over, education system, and goes, "This is how you're going to learn." Like the notion of empirical thought, excuse me, that never impressed me. This is wonderful, and it never impressed me. I think that a lot of people of different cultures look at the spiritual ways of life and how that is way more important than education, or how the community, how family is more important than what other people may think is important.
Given some of those differences, and given the fact that in some or many Native American cultures, education is not a top priority, what do you say to a young man or woman, a tribal member, when they're thinking about coming to school, this one or any other one? How would you tell them, based on your experience, that it is something that they ought to try?
Well, I would tell them, number one, don't believe everything you hear, because there are things that I was taught in the classroom that I thought was ridiculous, and that I kept on mentioning to the professor that this is theory, isn't it? And they would get upset at me because a lot of the stuff I just didn't believe what they had to say. And another thing is that is to show up for class. No matter what your head tells you when you get up in the morning, show up. That was real important for me to get through school. and so I tell them that, and I tell them that, if there's any way that I can be of help or of service to you, then I'm here for you.
One last question along the same line. Show up. That's a message that you give to young people, Native American peoples thinking about coming to school. What about the whole concept of time? And it was certainly something we talked about a lot when I worked on the Wind River Indian Reservation. Anglo cultures, Caucasian people have a different, and I'm as bad an example as anybody. If I'm obsessive about anything, it's about being on time. But doesn't have the same power or importance to all other cultures. Is that truly the case with many Native American people?
Yeah, that's truly the case, and it's like European Americans. If you're late, it's disrespectful or it's rude, or whereas in the Native culture, it's whenever you get there. It's okay that we're alive today, but that our spirits will live on in that. So time is really not that important. If you honestly believe that when you die, your spirit is going to continue to live, then how important is time?
And again, is that something you see as a barrier to Native American students? I mean, show up, be on time, and we take attendance in many colleges, and classes start on a pretty rigorous schedule, on the hour, or 10 minutes after, 10 minutes till. Those are concepts that some Native American students find difficult to deal with?
Yeah, I do, just because they're not used to it. And again, what's important to them may not be important to other people. So there's that cultural difference.
Thank you.
Something else we hear a lot about, money, and you certainly have addressed that since your arrival here, and that is the content of curricula, what is taught. We can take as an example history. We hear often individuals in the women's movement and from people of color and so forth that obviously our history is emphasized, not only European history, but the role of men and so forth. Would you address this question and give us your thinking on what should be addressed and what those omissions mean to people who have been left out of the basic emphasis in content of recording the human race and what it has done?
I can give an example of when I was going to school and they were teaching U.S. history, and I was going through the textbook and I saw that there was like 4 or 5 pages in this thick textbook on Native Americans, and I went to the professor and I said, there must be some kind of mistake here, because we've been here for thousands of years and you have 3 or 4 pages on us, and yet you have 8 chapters on Puritans, and to me that signifies ethnocentrism. It signifies disrespect for us as a people, and And I like to call it institutional racism, because to me that's what it is. And so when I go to college and I see what they're teaching, I didn't take that course because of that. I told them that I refused to take the course because what you're teaching isn't the truth. And he got really mad at me. But see, these are things that I would like to see where faculty becomes more aware of, cultural sensitivity. And I would like to see that. But when you've been trained a certain way to think a certain way all your life, and then a person of color comes up and goes, "Excuse me, but this is disrespectful," or I'm sure there's a better way of putting it to them, but it really seems to threaten people, and that's one thing that I don't want to do at all, but I think that cultural diversity is about a higher consciousness.
I hear you saying in your answer that the dominant culture and the people in that have been trained from K through 12 in higher education to present in a certain way, so they may have as much difficulty trying to change or adjust as the students from other cultures. How you build these bridges is a challenge.
Yeah.
About 2 minutes, Janelle.
I want to follow along that line of questioning. Sometimes we would like to be more sensitive, but we don't know how. What advice would you give to people like myself, for example, when I want to be in tune, I want to be more sensitive? How would you instruct me?
I think that coming from a human being perspective, I think that to be kind and gentle to people is is really one of the strongest things that you can do for yourself and other people.
So if I don't want to hurt someone's feelings, the way I can do that is to be kind with them and well-meaning. Will they help me know if I'm doing something that's offensive to them?
I think if you're coming from being kind and gentle, yes, they will.
On that note, we have to bring the program to conclusion. That's a nice note on which to end. On behalf of our panel and our staff, Monty, Twin, thank you for taking this time to be with us, and it's been most informative. And again, our thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you've enjoyed our program, and I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time when we will move to discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.